All right, guys. I hope you can see me, and I welcome you to this session on "Don't Touch My Go: Balancing Consistency with Customization." I have with me Sambit Dash is going to be taking in this session. Sambit, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Varun. Hi, everyone.
Hey, awesome. So Sambit is a friend. He's formerly we started together in Nestle back in 2011. He had graduated from Ahmedabad before joining Nestle. Uh, at Nestle, he worked on in the beverages team. So he worked on Nestle, then he worked on Nescafe for many years before getting into Taco Bell as the head of marketing there. For India, launched a lot of impactful campaigns, spent almost 3 years there. End of last year, he shifted to Mama Earth, which is a brand which is coming up quite substantially over the last few months, and he is the vice president there, leads marketing, and we're very lucky to have him share his thoughts with us. Over to you, Sambit.
Thank you, Varun. So the way I kind of will introduce my 9 years in marketing till now would be I've worked on four big brands or four prominent brands: Nestle, Nescafe, Taco Bell, and now Mama Earth. And each of the four has been a completely different experience for me. And everything I've learned over these years is because of the diverse experience of these brands. Nestle, when I worked on Nestle in 2011 to 2014, it was a new category. Iced tea was not a very existing concept in India, I would say. Very few brands existing in India, and very, very small category, which we kind of built with Nestle. Nescafe, of course, the other end of the spectrum, where a brand and a category that's existed in India for decades and decades, more than half a century before I joined it, and a brand that almost everybody knew when I joined it. So, very different challenges, more on usage than on brand awareness. Then to Taco Bell, which is a brand which is a cult brand in USA, but very little knowledge and awareness of it in India back when I joined in 2017. In fact, I joined it when there were 13 restaurants in India, and I left when there were about 64 restaurants. So a very different journey over there. And now Mama Earth from February 2020 onwards. Some would say a startup, but I realize more people know about Mama Earth than knew about Taco Bell. So probably more aware brand than Taco Bell used to be. So today's session is about balancing consistency with customization. I'll Let's just start with what this consistency means and why we need to be consistent, and let's go the other way around and start talking about what happens when you are inconsistent as a brand. If you use wrong colors, or if you keep changing the colors that you use, the kind of fonts that you keep using, where it basically is an obstacle to brand recognition. When you use different colors, different fonts in different videos or advertisements, then it just leaves customers with kind of a confused state of mind. For example, this one, as soon as I see it, if I have 2 seconds to register it, if it's a billboard on the roads and I'm going past it, I'm not really sure as a customer whether I'm looking at Coca Cola or Pepsi, because the logo, the font are different, the colors are different. And similarly, the other way around, which is if I put the Pepsi logo on top of, let's say, the Coke trademark sign and the Coke colors, uh, it's just that there is a reason why brands for the last hundreds of years have been using the same colors and same fonts consistently over and over again. It's not because they're boring people and don't know what to do, how to kind of reinvent or be creative. It's because subconsciously it registers with consumers. But and that kind of leads us to what a textbook definition for a brand would be. And this I've genuinely just picked this statement up from one of the marketing 101 books that we used to have in IIM Ahmedabad. What is a brand used to be defined as a type of product manufactured by a particular company under a particular trademark or trade name and identified through its unique name, symbol, or visual. So you see, in the previous two examples, I showed you a trademark, which is the logo. I showed you the name, which is the name of the brand in the logo itself, and then the unique name, symbol, and the colors, visual representation that was done. So all of that comes into a typical definition of a brand. I would kind of challenge this. Taking a leaf out of the great Jeff Bezos, who said that your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room, which alludes to what consumers think of you is what your brand is rather than what you want it to be. So if you see the textbook definition of a brand, it's a manufacturer's way of looking at brands, which is I, as a company, am manufacturing this particular product and I've put this particular name and logo on it, and I decide to use these colors on top of it, and therefore this is a brand, versus what consumers have perceived it to be basis everything that I do. And therefore I'll challenge the textbook definition, and I'll kind of reword it or frame it in a different way. I'll say that a brand is a compilation of consumer perceptions. For example, Apple stands for simplicity in design. It stands for simplicity in everything, in design, in usage, in just how you can access your files anywhere simply on a touch of a button. You don't have to kind of link with different apps or different softwares, etc. You don't have to download other too many other softwares or layers. It's just hardware, software coming all together. So Apple is all about simplicity. Harley Davidson is about, it's not really just a motorcycle, it's about the freedom that that motorcycle gives. So every time you think of a Harley Davidson or a Harley Davidson customer, will always be thinking about the freedom of the road that they get when they are a Harley Davidson user. Similarly, Airbnb is not just it's not just a guest house chain or a hotel chain or a, I don't know, marketplace of where consumers can meet lodgers or lodging rooms. It's not just that. It's a brand that provides authentic local experiences. That's what they try to achieve through their communication. That's how the interface has been built, and that's what the consumers perceive Airbnb to be. And similarly, Nike is not just shoes. It's actually much more, many more products than shoes now. But it's about the belief that you can do it. If you have the will and you want to achieve something, you can do it. And everything that they do is from that perspective. So a brand is a compilation of the consumer perceptions. Now, just consumer perceptions is not good enough. I mean, that takes care of what Jeff Bezos said. But at the end of the day, we are running a business. It's not just I just don't want people to think good about my brand without any ulterior motive to it. So as a brand manager or a marketeer, I'm also trying to make a profit out of the entire enterprise. It's a commercial enterprise, right? So to complete that sentence, it's a compilation. Brand is a compilation of the consumer perceptions that allows an organization to price a product at a markup. A cup of coffee on the streets would cost you anything between 20 to 40 rupees. But the same cup of coffee, or let's say a similar cup of coffee, maybe better roast, better beans, better little better extraction, etc., would cost you 240 bucks on Starbucks. If you ask me if the same product had to be sold on the streets without the Starbucks branding, maybe it's not 40 bucks, maybe it's 60 bucks, but it's definitely not 240 bucks. 240 bucks a consumer is not paying just for that coffee. They are paying for that brand of Starbucks. They're paying for that experience of entering a Starbucks, ordering, that entire process of ordering, getting that smell, and feeling that you're getting a superior experience in life and not just a superior product. And from here, here, so this is a definition of a brand. Now we come to what we can do as brand marketeers. This consumer perception is not just a manufacturer making some products, putting it in the shelf of a marketplace, putting it in a big bazaar, or launching it on e-commerce and then waiting for consumers to form an opinion about it. We need to form a coherent brand story with enough ingredients to be able to direct consumers' perceptions in a specific direction. And great brands are able to build this coherent story on a regular basis and across touch points. So they decide one story, which you can call as the tagline or the brand positioning or whatever. And then and once that is decided on a regular, consistent basis, they keep building it across different touch points, whether it's videos, whether it's static, whether it's the product itself or packaging itself. I'll take an example of Coca Cola, which ha- has been one of my favorite brands for a while, especially when they had this campaign of open happiness across the world. I'm sure many of you would remember it even from the Indian communications. So it's a strong, Coca Cola is a strong global brand, a leader in its category globally. The target audience is families compared to young people, which Pepsi, its direct competitor, kind of targets. The brand tonality that Coca Cola has is about optimism and happiness. It's not about dynamism or challenging the status quo. It's not about as big aspirations of youth. It's about optimism and happiness. And the positioning that Coca Cola had during this campaign period was to Coke stands for enjoying life's simple pleasures. Enjoying life's simple pleasures. It's a very, very straightforward positioning, which you can see Coke has been kind of true to through all their touch points. I'll just show you the TVC that they had in India back in, I think it was 2010, 11, when globally the world was going through a recession. In India also, we were going through a downturn in GDP. There was generally a little bit of negativity. There were some terrorist activities as well, wars playing out, etc., which honestly keeps coming back every few years. But that was a period of time where uh, generally there was an air of negativity and cynicism across in news as well. And Coke had come up with this beautiful ad of Ummido Wali Dhoop in India as well. Can we play that ad?
उम्मीद वाली धूप सनशाइन वाली आशा रोने की वजह कम है हंसने के बहाने ज्यादा दिन है मुस्कुराएंगे खुश रहने का है वादा उम्मीद वाली धूप सनशाइन वाली आशा तुम दिल से अगर पूछोगे वो खुश रहना ही चाहे जब सच्चे मन से मांगो तो खुल जाती है राहें तो खुल के खुशी लुटाओ ये क्या है आधा आधा उम्मीद वाली धूप सनशाइन वाली आशा उम्मीद वाली धूप सनशाइन वाली आशा
So yeah, you can see in that TVC as well. It stands true to the tagline of open happiness, the tonality of optimism and happiness, and overall the positioning of enjoying life's simple pleasures. It was very contextual at that point of time. I'm sure some of you would have seen it and remember it as well. And what's the best part of it is that as soon as you see that ad, you know it is Coca Cola because it really works with that brand story. And of course, creatively, it was really well received and did really well for the brand. But a TVC is not the only way to communicate. You can see in their billboards and their ads and their social media as well. Everything that they did was whether it's contextual to a festival season, whether it's in US where they're doing a Christmas campaign, whether it's in Brazil where they're doing La La La, etc. Everywhere they had a similar storytelling or similar positioning to the brand. This is what I call as a coherent storytelling. All of this builds back to Coke being seen as a brand that's about positivity and about enjoying simple moments of life. Even packaging innovations that they did where the name in Australia, and I think in South Africa as well. In two countries, they tried this, where on the packaging they had put in names of different people. They knew that in the country, 80 names take care of some 70% of 70% of the population. So just putting those on the names adds happiness. Then they had a share a Coke campaign later on in a couple of years. They had these different moments on the Coke can packaging as well. So all of this was trying to kind of build on that same story of enjoying the simple moments of life. Activations in India with the Happiness Without Borders, where a mall in Delhi, there was a machine that was installed where consumers can come in and there's a video screen on the machine. Uh, and on the other side, you see somebody from Pakistan, a mall in Pakistan. And then if you kind of if both sides of the video put their hands on the same spot, then a Coke can comes out free from the machine on both sides, and both of them can enjoy it. Just showing that happiness is without borders. In Singapore, if you hugged this machine, then you got a Coke free. In Philippines, Brazil, and many of the African countries as well, they had this Coke mobile that was going around. Social media gave updates about where that Coke mobile is, and wherever, whichever town or city it reaches, if you line up over there, you'll get a Coke, free Coke. So it was just distributing happiness, is how they put it. So everywhere, it's the same storytelling. But when I talk about what works, it's always interesting to also see how it can go wrong. So I took Coke's example to show how they did this extremely well across touch points, across geographies, not only in India or US, across geographies. It was one story for Coke across around the world. I gave that as a great example. Let me give you the other side, the flip side of the story, again using Coke as an example. When a brand stays away from a coherent brand story, things can be very different. When we think about brand stories, mostly people think about communication, because that's what storytelling, and that's the first and most exciting thing of storytelling that comes to people. But when I say coherent brand story, it's not only the communication. Actually, the communication is the last part of it. It starts from the product, packaging, what you stand for, the kind of promotions you run, visibility, everything. So the example that I'll take is about a product change that they did. And I think many of you would know about this story, but maybe I'll put new perspective to it with this case study. Coca-Cola originated in 1886, so yeah, a long time back, and it's been a market leader globally since then. It's gone through a few changes in their packaging, but if you count it, it's 9 changes across more than 134 years. So that's not really that much compared to brands today who make changes in packaging every couple of years. And what's even more awesome is that they have been very consistent in their storytelling over decades. So they had started, so it started as a very functional beverage related to digestion and as a almost as a pharmaceutical beverage. But over time, in the 40s, 50s, they had already become something around refreshment, and delicious tasting refreshment. So by that time, they came to this thing that ask for Coca-Cola and get it. Satisfaction comes in the genuine. So you can see from this ad itself that they're trying to build Coke as the genuine taste of refreshment. And then you see going forward over the 50s, over the 60s, 70s, it continues in the same vein. It's still continuous quality year after year. It's still about Coca-Cola being pure and wholesome. So pure builds on that fact of original taste. Then it's the real thing Coke again builds on the fact that it's the real taste of refreshment. If it's the real thing Coke, again, only Coke is Coca-Cola and only Coca-Cola is Coke. So there was actually a video ad and TVC on this as well. There's nothing like a Coke, this billboard on the right, 50 million Cokes being sold in it or consumed in a day. All of this is trying to build the same thing, that Coke is original. Coca-Cola is original. There is one taste of Coke. In fact, there was also a parallel storytelling that they were doing through news and, for a better word, I would say just buzz, which was around the fact that there is a secret recipe of Coca-Cola that is locked away in the company headquarters, and that is the same taste, that is the same recipe that's being used for decades. They never confirmed or denied this, but this was kind of a story that they liked to build on in the background. The reality is that the taste, that the ingredients of Coca-Cola had changed many times, but the taste never changed. So even if the ingredients changed for, let's say, regulatory reasons or because of supply reasons or costing, the R&D team of Coca-Cola always ensured that the taste of Coca-Cola never changes across 60, 70, 80 years since the launch. And therefore, they were able to build this. And since they were the market leader, it helped them to build on this fact that Coca-Cola, there is a real taste of Coca-Cola, and Coke is original, and it is the original taste of refreshment. And the tagline in the early 1980s was still Coke is it. So Coke is it was a campaign that again reinforced this storytelling or positioning of the fact that there is only one taste of Coca-Cola or there's only one taste of refreshment. There is an ad. I think you can refer to it later on, but it just builds on the same thing that I'm talking about right now. So I'll not spend time on showing it. Uh, but the main point is for 40, 50 years, they were telling this story. And then something happened. In the 1980s, Coca-Cola faced tough competition from Pepsi. Pepsi had been building a separate. Pepsi had been building itself as a young taste, the refreshment taste of the youth. It's the young people's beverage. And on top of that, in the 80s, Pepsi just chanced upon this fact that when they were doing certain blind tastes, most consumers, more than 60% of the consumers, preferred Pepsi over Coca Cola. And Pepsi took this out on the streets. They ran television commercials on it. They actually did activations in malls and marketplaces where they set up kiosks and gave consumers two different cola beverages and asked them to tell which one they prefer. And then they took out the sticker and showed what the brand was. And consumers were mostly amazed and I would say surprised with the fact that they believe themselves to be Coca-Cola loyalists, and suddenly they see that in a blind tasting they are preferring Pepsi. And Pepsi called this as a Pepsi challenge, the Pepsi Taste Challenge. They ran television commercials over it as well. They did a lot of PR press releases on this as well, and this helped them take market share away from Coca-Cola. And faced with this, Coca-Cola did something which logically makes a lot of sense. They spent more than $6 million. They did feedback from more than 2 lakh consumers. They did intensive research across years to develop a product that was better than Pepsi. They did to, the 2 lakh consumers all blind tastes. They made people taste their the original Coke, this new Coke, and Pepsi, and more than 60% this time preferred new Coke, not only versus their original Coke, but better than Pepsi as well. Now, this makes sense, right? They have a better product. They've realized that they're losing out on product. They realize that their biggest competition is taking share because of better tasting product. Obviously, they should do consumer research. They should figure out a better recipe for themselves, which they did. Makes sense that they launch it. It makes a lot of sense. Now, the only question is, in retrospect, let's look at where Coke was at that point of time. They were the leader in the category, although they had been losing market share, but they were still predominant leader in the category. Their target audiences were families, which was very different from Pepsi's. Their brand tonality was still about communication with emotional appeal. So it was not as much about product as it was about the fact that this is original. This is the taste that you have been trusting for a long time. This is what you had as a youth. This is what you had when you were a child. So it's still that emotional appeal. It's not really product tasting better than anyone else, which is what the competition was taking as a route. And the positioning that Coca-Cola had was that it's the real taste of refreshment. It's the original, authentic taste of refreshment, and there is nothing else like it. Now, with this, if this line of positioning is the story that I have been telling my consumers, does it make sense to now launch another Coca-Cola recipe and call it a Coca-Cola? I mean, it would have been understandable if they had launched it as a new Coke, as a second version of Coca-Cola. But what they actually did was they phased out or they stopped producing their original recipe. They said that this recipe is now outdated. We are keeping it out. They called out a press conference and they said that we are making a bold move. We are replacing our ingredient or our recipe across in Coca-Cola, and we are going to make it into this new and improved recipe and taste of Coca-Cola. So you will not have the original Coca-Cola anymore. This is the origin, or this is the new, or this is the Coca-Cola that you will be getting. Now, if I've been telling my consumers for decades that this is the Coca-Cola is the real taste of refreshment, and now I come and say, ki, forget the real taste of refreshment, forget that original recipe that you've been drinking for 80 years. I have suddenly found that was probably not as good as what I can give you today. I have suddenly found a much better tasting Coca-Cola. So forget all about the previous one, and from now onwards, take this as the real Coca-Cola. It now starts sounding a little dubious, and after having given that kind of a preface, you would understand what actually happened was New Coke did not deliver. It wasn't coherent storytelling for those who loved Coca-Cola, which was a large amount of people because it was the leading market share cola brand in US. You won't believe it, but there were actually people out on the streets, just like people are out in the streets for a revolution. They had these placards down with Coca-Cola, ban Coca-Cola, new taste. There was a court appeal. There was somebody who sued Coca-Cola that they cannot take away the original Coke recipe because that original Coke recipe is an American heritage. So if they don't want to sell it, then they need to publish the recipe so that others can drink it on their own. So there were those kind of court cases going in and this kind of consumer response. And eventually, Coke had to come back within months, 4 months, I think. They had to come back, or 3 months, I think. They had to come back with the original Coke. And they had to then finally do what probably had made sense in the beginning as well, that have the original Coke as Coke and then have a new Coke as a separate variant that you're launching, which you're saying is a better taste than Pepsi, let's say, or kind of just talk about taste with that, but basically have do different sub brands. They finally had to do that after 3 4 months, and in the process they lost a lot of money. They lost a lot of prestige and some amount of trust as well. They did eventually regain most of their market share, but not without heartburn. There is some people would say that it was probably a master strategist who came up with this idea of creating this entire thing so that people remember how much they love Coke, but they themselves had come out multiple times saying they are neither as dumb nor as smart as to do something like that. In summary, a brand, the definition I put forward before you today is a brand is a compilation of the consumer perceptions that allows an organization to price a product at a markup. So this definition has two parts. One is that uh, a brand is not what you as a marketing person or as a brand owner have decided to put in front of the consumer, but it's what the consumer decides or consumer perceives of you or your brand. That actually defines the brand. And the second part is that it should allow an organization to price a markup on that product. Basically, it should not be a commoditized product. You should be able to charge something more than what you would for a commodity. The second part in the summary is that brands need to build a story. This is where brand owners and marketeers like us have our role to play. We need to decide on a story and then build a coherent story on the brand, and which is backed by experience, product, packaging, communication, everything to try and achieve that desired consumer perception. And lastly, great brands that exist today have all been built through this coherent story, and that coherent story has been told on a regular, consistent basis across touch points. Mm, Varun, should we take a few questions now?
Yeah, okay. Let's take in a couple of questions. So one is from Vidyasagar, who says, "Doesn't consistency make a brand predictable and boring, and leaving it open to attack from newer, exciting competitors?"
Uh, so there's this famous thing that a lot of my bosses have told me, and I'm sure Varun, you would have heard it as well, that marketers get bored of their consistency much before consumers even realize there is a consistency. Most consumers don't see consistency as boring because they are not getting they're not seeing your brand more than 4 or 5 times in a few months. So by the time they realize it is being consistent, it takes a year or so. So that's first part. Second is consistency doesn't make you predictable and boring, because consistency is in the storytelling, not in the story itself that you use. So it's the positioning that for example, Coca Cola, their positioning or their story that they chose to tell was about this little moments of happiness. Little moments of happiness could be anything. It could be Santa Claus in December for Christmas. It could be that Ummido Wali Dhoop when there is cynicism across the world. It could be about that little bit of nook joke between a couple when they get married at the first time. It's basically about spreading happiness, which could be anywhere in any relationship, any place, etc., etc. So uh, you should be able to build a lot of stories which keep it exciting going forward and yet have it in the same zone.
Yeah, so let me present forward versions of the argument. Now, we did a session together on Nescafe a few months ago where we were showing campaigns over the years, and you would have noticed that even though there were strategic and subtle differences in the campaigns, once a brand has decided to talk about being the cup of resolve, then the kind of stories that you're going to talk about are going to be stories of resolve. So one way is to say that yes, I can show resolve in many different ways, but at the other end, it does make the brand and the agency's job hard to keep coming up with completely fresh stories that also have the same brand tonality, but are also newer, interesting stories for their regular users to consume. Um, do you think creativity in general, coming up with these stories, becomes hard when you have when a brand is chosen to be consistent?
In my experience, not so, because the position that a brand chooses is generally open enough. Like it's even in Nescafe's case, it's still about resolve. That resolve could be shown in multiple ways. It could be my individual resolve. It could be a resolve as a team. It could be my individual resolve to achieve my career objectives. It could be my individual resolve to be able to go forward in life when something difficult comes my way. It could be multiple stories. And then there's also a choice of whether it needs to be a TV ad every time, or is it, let's say, we start, if it's about resolve, then I start doing something around giving startups money, investing in startups, and making stories out of those people, out of real people achieving their dreams, etc. So what I'm trying to say is that a brand's story positioning is generally, if it's not, it can be a challenge, but generally it is open enough. In Nescafe's case, it surely was. In Coke's case, we've seen them do that for 7, 8 years without any issues. And I think they had many more years, and they made a strategic change because of business reasons rather than because they were stuck in a creative rut. In Mama's case, we are positioning ourselves as a brand that stands for good choices in life. Those good choices, and the tagline is goodness inside. Now, those good choices, of course, still gives us enough space to kind of play with where we want to go. The second part that Vidyasagar probably puts forward is that once I have decided to stick to a story, if I stay consistent with it, doesn't it leave me open to attack from new competitors who know what I stand for and can take a very different route? Um, well, it does and it doesn't, because it does because they know what I want to stand for, and they can decide what they want to stand for accordingly. But at the same time, if I keep changing my stance based on what my competitor is doing, then I'll never stand for anything, which is not great either. Then the consumer will always be confused, what is this brand all about? And therefore, I would say in the larger run, it always helps you to be more consistent.
Yeah, and one of the things we teach in our programs is depending on what scale the category is, you choose your opportunity accordingly. So, for instance, if you're building a new category, then the benefit, the position that you want to own should be the one that people care for the most, right? And so if you start to occupy that, it basically ensures that whatever else someone is coming up with, sure, it is leaving you to attack, but you've already occupied the most the most precious real estate in the category. So in that sense, choosing something that people really care about, as a, in a substantial way. So in the case of, for example, tea, it could be taste, right? And you just say that with the taste is tea. Now you go figure out what else you want to talk about. You want to talk about hygienic tea, healthy tea, whatever it is. But if I can own something which is a strong a strong benefit, then that's there. If I'm on the other hand coming in when someone is already playing, or playing that game, then I have to balance it a little more carefully. So I think that consistency in that sense is important, but obviously it's not the only game in town. You have to think of other scenarios there when you're thinking about competition. Okay.
Fair.
Let me take in one more question before we go forward. And the reason I'm taking it is because it's just related to the ad that you showed in. So Anurag just asked, what do you think a brand gets from playing an ad like the one that you just played from Coke? What does that do for the brand?
So, firstly, a brand like an ad like this can only be done or should only be attempted by brands like Coca Cola, Nescafe, or basically brands with stature, which consumers already know what that brand is and what it stands for, because it builds on that rather than tells them for the first time what it stands for. Um, and therefore, the objective for Coca Cola with any of their communication becomes more of saliency and more of loyalty with their consumers than about telling the consumers for the first time what they stand for or what products they sell. uh, in this ad as well, the objective was, in a very contextual manner, remind the world what Coca Cola stands for. And because it is so memorable, it will be top of mind for you. So, therefore, every time you're thinking about that category, whether it's for as a customer, as a consumer as well, it's the first brand that comes in your head. It basically takes a lot of mind space in your head. That's the objective that a brand like Coca Cola would have with most of their ads, definitely with this ad for sure. And that's
Okay,
something
awesome.
that
So what
brands of stature like Nescafe, Maggie, Coca Cola, they can achieve. Airtel, these are brands that can do it. Smaller brands or newer brands who still need to tell the world what their story is, or forget the story, maybe one step before that, what products they sell. Brands that try to achieve that would probably not do storytelling of this sort.
Okay, awesome. So why don't you go ahead with the rest of your deck, and then there's some really good questions that have come in from Priyanka, Kritika, Anurag again, right? So I'll take these once you're done with the rest of your deck.
Fair. So, so we've landed up with a definition of brands and how coherent storytelling helps in achieving those brand perceptions. Now, one point I want to make, especially because I've named this deck or this presentation as "Don't play with my logo," is that consistent use of unique brand identifiers is important. This is something that all of us are taught as budding marketeers in our first roles itself. That uh, uh, don't don't change the font styles, don't change the logo, don't uh, change the Pantone shade or the exact shade of the color that is used on the brand. Don't change those things. Please use that as regularly as possible. And because there's a science to it, it's not something that people say just for the heck of it. There is a science to it. It's been seen through multiple researches that when you use the exact same shade multiple number of times, it and with your brand name, then it helps build brand salience. And therefore, every time a consumer sees that color, they automatically remember your brand. So if there's a red color that somebody sees, or that kind of shade of red, not a very dark, but that particular kind of shade, which is Pantone 485C, then they immediately think of either a Nescafe or a Coca Cola, depending on which consumer you are. Similarly, blues, you'll remember Pepsi. And there are different colors, maybe a yellow, you'll remember Maggie. There are different colors that kind of remind you of different brands. There are different font styles also that remind you of different brands, because this is all kind of it just works as a science. It's been tested multiple number of times that using the same colors, fonts, logos again and again with your brand messaging just helps the consumer uh, when they see the your particular ad fifth time, sixth time, or just a billboard somewhere, or just a stamp ad on social media, or a banner ad, even though it's such a small one and they're spending only 1 second on it, just because of that color, and they've seen your brand with that color so many times before, they will recall it immediately. So it does help a lot. To just kind of make that point a little better, let me show you these three visuals. You can see the brand name has not been mentioned in any of these, and yet I'm very sure most of you know which brand this is. The brand name honestly is not mentioned anywhere. I've kind of masked it everywhere, and yet most of you would know that this is Indigo. Um, Going back to the slide without the brand names, on this you can see that the colors are exactly the same. There are shades of it which are all defined, and you would have seen these shades on this brand advertisement multiple number of times. The font is exactly same. It's been well defined. The messaging also, if you realize, is all about punctuality and time. Early come, early go, Indigo standard time, on time is a wonderful thing. All of these are again about punctuality, which is what the brand is trying to tell as a story, that they are the most punctual. Or this is what they were telling for a long time after launch. Now they've kind of gone a little broader. They also trying to talk about their network and now about safety. But earlier, this was the one thing that they kept on talking about for years and years. So using these colors and these messages and these font styles again and again helps you immediately recall Indigo when you see this ad. And I'll tell you how this helps. Just imagine seeing this ad while you are, let's say, driving down at 40, 50 kilometers per hour, and you see a billboard. Now you're driving, you're obviously not spending too much time on the billboard. You just see it with peripheral vision. You notice the colors, you notice some kind of fonts, you probably read the headline as well, but you've missed out the logo somewhere. You've not read the entire text, you've just read something around Indigo Standard Time, or you've just read On Time is a Wonderful Thing. Just because of that color and that font style and the visual layout of it, I am sure most of you will immediately recall it as Indigo, even if it's just a 2 second peripheral vision that you've spent on it. Similarly, on a stamp pad on Facebook, if you just see one small ad somewhere on the top right or somewhere, even if that's not what you are really looking at, you're trying to read your feed. Even then, on the right hand side somewhere in your peripheral vision, you notice it and you will recall it. That's how using these elements again and again help you. And how Indigo had done it was by putting a very simple visual identity within their system. Everybody in Indigo, everybody who was working on the brand, whether it's the brand team or the agencies, knew these are the fonts to use. These are the three shades of, or three colors to use, or four colors: white, this lighter blue, this darker blue, and this darker black. I'm not sure if you can read over here, but next to the colors, the CMYK, the exact color coding have also been defined. And that's how the entire internal team and the agencies know this is what you use consistently all the time. So that's how consistent usage kind of help you. But at the same time, I'll give you exceptions, or I'll tell you where you can play with it a little bit, and playing with it will actually help you in some cases. And in these cases, brands and brand managers need to be flexible about it. Flexible to the extent, so I can talk about how in some places you should do a different font. Like for example, if you're doing a Diwali promotion, Diwali consumer promotion, on that consumer promotion font that you use, you'll probably not always use your regular standard fonts. You'll probably play with it just to give it a little bit of a festive kind of environment. You'll probably play with some fireworks or diyas and rangolis, which normally on your brand may not work. But in this particular case, you might take an exception. So fonts, colors, I know sometimes brands already take exceptions. I'm going to take an example. I'm going to take few examples of logos where brands have taken exceptions to this rule of being consistent, and where it has actually helped them. Now, if you're playing with your logo, that's probably the biggest most like the biggest exception you can take on not being consistent. So I'm going to take a few examples of that. But in each of these examples that I talk about next, those playing with the logo and being slightly inconsistent with the logo has helped them tell their brand story better, and that's why it works. So, for example, Google has been doing Google Doodles for decades now. From the early 2000s, they've been doing it. So not decades, sorry, but many years now. From the early 2000s, they've been doing it. Earlier, much less frequently. Now they do it almost at a daily basis, depending on which country you are in. Now, a classical marketeer who works on trademarks would look at this and be aghast because the logo keeps changing. In fact, the first three, four examples still look similar with just like a snowman or a polar bear or an animal thrown in. But the bottom examples are completely different. Not even the same font. So it'll look, I mean, some people might be aghast by it, but how it works is it gives Google personality. If you think about it, Google is just a machine-based algorithm. Now it's become like phones and everything else. But for the longest time, they were basically a search engine and ad platform. And that search engine was based on machine-based algorithms. If they had to say what they do best, it's they give you the maximum most relevant search results in the shortest amount of time or the fastest algorithm that can achieve that. That's all machine based. There are people writing codes behind it for sure, but the consumer is interacting only with machine based algorithms. Machine based algorithms aren't the most exciting things, they're not the sexiest, right? But and it's also not emotional to talk about a brand or a company as just technology machine based kind of thing. These things, these Google Doodles, gave Google personality. It made Google a fun, interesting brand, and actually fun, interesting brand that's backed by intelligent people. And because it's fun, interesting, and there is people involved behind it, therefore it's a brand that I can suddenly start trusting. It's not just some AI in the back end, it's people that are behind it, people who have their own interests and hobbies and are interesting people. So that's what this helped them do. Another example would be MTV. MTV changes their logo on a yearly basis. Every year they launch a new logo. It's on the same zone, but colors, many times fonts, the textures, everything keeps on changing. Now, how does this make sense? Again, it's because it helps them tell that story, their positioning story a little better. So MTV has positioned itself as the trendiest, hottest social destination. Updating their logo every year, just like fashion updates every season, helps MTV keep up to this positioning of being seen as the trendiest, hottest social destination. One more example I'll give you is from a brand that I have worked on, which is Taco Bell. Now, Taco Bell wants to be a culture-centric lifestyle brand. A culture-centric lifestyle brand is very similar to a fashion brand. It's something that keeps on updating itself with times. It picks on the latest trends. It is the most exciting, the hottest. It should be the talk of the town, right? Therefore, Taco Bell has always taken liberty with their logos as well. So on the top left is the actual logo, the normal standard original logo, let's call it. When we launched Crispy Chicken, um, the logo was changed to the bottom left one, which is the same logo, same bell, but made with a crispy chicken kind of a texture with a bite being taken out of the bell. On the top, you can see a similar version with cheese, which was used when we launched a cheesy product called Quesalupa. On the right, you can see a version which was used for Diwali. On the bottom, you can see one which is lighted, which was used in Spain for launching their late night deliveries and announcing that they are open in late nights as well. So they launched that late night destination as a after party hopover. So people at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock after drinks used to go to Taco Bell to have a few tacos. So this was the logo that was used to launch that. The one in the bottom you can see is one that was launched for a music contest or a DJ contest that was done in Australia. And on the right, you can see a few packaging examples. The yellow one for breakfast, which is more bright and sunny. and the right one is for the core products, which are regular standard savory products. And there are multiple variations of it where the colors keep on changing. You can see we played a lot with the logo, and simply because it helped us tell this story of being a culture centric lifestyle brand better. It made us, we were able to be on trend all the time with each of our new launches because we were able to change our logo. It's kind of the best way to kind of tell our brand story and also launch a new thing. And yet, if you ask me if I'll do it on the brand that I'm working on right now, maybe not. At this point of time, I don't see any reason to do it. It doesn't tell my story better at all. Mama stands for goodness in the little things and the little choices we make. We want to be a trusted brand, which is good quality, trusted brand that is good for you, is natural, non-toxin, etc., etc. Now, all of these things around trust are solid things which should be unchanging, and therefore changing the brand logo definitely doesn't help. Probably only takes away from what the brand stands for, and therefore probably will not be changing it on this logo. This is just to say that the previous three examples are more exceptions than the rule. Just to end this session with, I'll give you two more examples. Because this is very relevant to what just happened recently with the COVID lockdown and social distancing being the trendy topic in the beginning of March and April. Many brands started using their logos, distancing parts of their logos and talking about social distancing. Um, this got them PR, but it got them PR from a point of view of 17 brands that did social distancing with their logo or changed their logo to promote social distancing. None of these brands got on an individual basis any additional extensive PR, and most of the consumers will not remember these changes. So these were just changes that were done for the sake of it. They didn't really tell a brand. So it didn't really work with what either McDonald's or Adidas, Mastercard, or Audi stands for. So it doesn't really help them. It was a trendy thing to do. Probably got them a few engagements on their posts. On a larger basis, those engagements probably weren't really worth making a whole change of the logo on. Didn't get them a lot of PR. Didn't really wasn't really something consumers remember them by, and therefore I feel that it wasn't really worth doing it. Whereas these two examples, where Coca Cola, which anyway stands for simple moments, enjoying the happy moments, and positive, tries to spread positivity through its brand. When they say something like staying apart is the best way to stay united, it's something that registers with a lot of US, at least the US consumers. And similarly with Nike, which talks about achieving your ambition, staying at it, and just doing it. When they say something like, if you ever dreamed of playing for millions around the world, now is your chance. And again, kind of helps them tell the story better. In fact, in the Nike example, they've not even changed their logo. They've kept their logo as it is. They just kind of told the story, their own brand story, a little better in a contextual manner by not having to even change their logo. So I would say these are better examples of how to be trendy than just kind of playing with your logo for the sake of it.
All right. Do we start taking in some more questions? Amit, there's some really interesting ones that's there.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. If I were going to add one point to your last couple of slides, I do think that even if the brand logo changes did not mean much for the brand, it does look good on when the marketing team is presenting to their CEO. So it's hard to say that there's no benefit to
It's
doing
a good
that.
slide. It's a good slide. It's a good slide. It tells you, you're able to tell your boss that you are really on trend. You understand what's going on.
Yes, absolutely. All right, let's get to some serious business driving questions. And there's so much out there. So I'm going to try and take as many as we can. Sambit is right now not at home. He is in Mumbai, and he's sort of very kindly agreed to do this session. So we're going to try and make the best use of the time. Sambit, first Akash talked about why some brands changed their logo, and he's taken the example of Snapdeal, which did a brand refresh exercise. I think it was in 2016 that they did this. Now, help us understand, how in examples like Snapdeal, what's the thought of the brand?
So honestly, the Snapdeal story I didn't follow as much. So I don't really have that much context. I remember they did a refresh. Uh, why brands do refresh as a general topic, I can probably talk about, but not specifically on the Snapdeal bit.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why do brands refresh? Because if you look at the history of Coke itself, its logo has evolved substantially over the years. So when do brands refresh? And is this something to keep in mind when you're refreshing your logo?
A bad a bad answer is when the marketing head changes,
Mhm.
but hopefully that's not the case for either Coke or Snapdeal. Generally, it makes sense when the brand needs a refresh, which means that from your KPI standpoint, you notice that either your imagery has become stagnant or declining, it's not improving, or if sometimes you've been getting regular feedback on how your brand is not good enough on something, like on quality parameters or on speed parameters or on something where basically you need to tell the consumers that you've changed in some way. uh, the Domino's example is on my mind right now. Some 10-15 years back, they had this huge thing about quality being an issue. Consumers were calling out Domino's pizza not being good quality. By the time it reached your home, it was almost leathery. Is the feedback that was going out, and the CEO came out very clearly saying that after all of these feedbacks and after research over the last 6 months, we are changing the brand altogether. And they changed their they played with their visuals, they changed some of the colors as well, and they made a refresh. And they said from now onwards, we are different, we are better than before. So then it makes sense. Uh, Airtel, I remember when they were making their huge logo change, it was to become more millennial. It was to become more younger because they had noticed that they were becoming slightly oldish, old-fashioned, etc. So it's a very big deal to make that change. So a brand would only do that when they realize that something they need to signal to their consumers that something big has changed. In Nescafe's case, also, we changed it in 2014, just when I was getting onto the brand, I remember. And that was a global refresh where the brand logo changed, the colors changed, a lot of things had changed, even the positioning had changed. And there also, the reason globally was that Nescafe was becoming an old brand. It was being considered as a brand that 35-year-olds were drinking because it was the coffee that they've been drinking for years. But young people, 15 years, 16 years, 18 years, 20 years, were not considering Nescafe as the choice beverage or choice coffee even. They were preferring to go to a younger Starbucks, which is cafes, or in Western worlds, other brands, which were which seemed more relevant to them. So then there was a huge change done on Nescafe, including the logo, just to signal that now we have changed, we are younger. So just changing the logo a little bit was trying to cue that in. So maybe Snapdeal was a similar thing. Either some feedback they would have got from consumers that they were trying to say we've improved on, or just trying to be more relevant to millennials.
Yeah, so at that point, basically, they were losing market share in a very substantial way. E-commerce was growing very quickly, but most of the gains were going to Amazon and some to Flipkart. So instead of it becoming a three-player market, it was largely becoming a two-player market. And so it was their way of trying to stay relevant and stand for something in the consumer's mind. So they spent, as per PR reports, they spent almost 200 crores on the entire exercise. We did a small case on it in at the when we, I think it was back in 2015 or whatever, mid of 15 or 16. I remember doing a case on it a long time ago. All right, so there is a question from Priyanka on how should an emerging brand pay attention to defining the brand story, compass, essence, etc., while the business is still getting evolved.
So I think, and this is something that I mean that I believe while on Taco Bell, on Nestle, and now as well, is that Um, there is a difference between how much money you spend on the brand story and developing the brand story. I think a brand story should be developed as soon as the brand exists. You should have a vision for what the brand stands for, and that's the brand story pretty much. Because that gives you a north star or a direction for how you are going to do everything from that point onwards. How the packaging develops, what are the colors used, what are the styles. If you do some advertisements on performance ads as well, if you put some e-commerce banners on Amazon as well, even those, what are the kind of words you will use for it? All of that gets linked to what was the brand story that you defined. So I think the brand story should exist as soon as the brand exists. It could be, of course, refined over the next few months and years, but it needs to always be there. And it needs to be the North Star for everything that you do. How much money you put on it, in the sense, when I say that, what I mean is, you probably don't need to do a brand communication telling your consumers what your brand stands for immediately. Maybe that's not the business requirement at that point of time. Maybe the business requirement is to first tell the consumers what your products are, what's the cost, what's the benefit of your products, how is it better than others. Maybe those brass tacks, the basics, is something that you need to tell your consumers first when you start off. And from that perspective, I'm saying you don't need to spend money on telling your story. But even when you are telling that product story, if your brand story has been defined, it will kind of seep into the product storytelling as well, whether it's in the colors or the way whether it's a dynamic shot. Just the execution style will also differ with what your brand stands for. Is it a caring brand, therefore softer execution? Is it a dynamic young millennial brand, in which case more cut kind of shots? So all of that kind of changes based on your brand story.
Yeah. All right. I think, Priyanka, if there's one thing I can add, I think the scale and the survivability of the brand is an important point that you can consider in. If you are a marketing person in a new brand, then it makes absolute sense to think about the story. But if you are a company owner who's just establishing a new business, you might want to remember that, I mean, to quote Jean-Paul Sartre, existence precedes essence. And obviously, he wasn't talking about marketing, but the quote still has validity, because the first job of any business owner is to get customers to buy their product. And sometimes in new businesses, the products evolve a lot, the customers evolve a lot, therefore the story will evolve a lot. So within Kraftshala itself, I think we knew what we wanted to do, broadly speaking, but we didn't define a story for the first couple of years at all, because we were still sort of very much evolving and figuring things out. We understood what worked for us and what didn't work for us. And then once we actually sat down to write the story, it came in much more naturally, and we were very sure. And once we did that, some of these discussions that followed became much sharper and much better. So in some cases, if you're in that situation where existence itself might be a question mark, then it's very much advisable to get a business running, to get customers running, and then take the story of the users, take the story of the brand and what it wants to do, and then combine it into something powerful and effective. I hope, Shailesh, we've also answered your question. So I'll move to the next one. Shubhra asks, how do marketers maintain consistent experience at touch points, like a supermarket where the brand is under the control of the retailer? Sambit, I'll make one addition to it. In addition to supermarket, maybe you can also speak about e-com platforms like an Amazon. How do brands maintain a consistent experience at these various touch points?
Sure. So I'll start with what a retailer in Switzerland had told me once, that in developed markets you don't realize that brands don't own the four P's anymore. The four P's are actually in control of the retailers. The product, sorry, the three P's at least out of the four are in my hand. The product is yours, but How I price it is up to me. I can discount it if I want. Even if you want to be a premium brand, I can still discount it. I can choose not to discount it as well. The placement is of course mine again. I can place it in whichever category I want to. I can place it in the bottom shelf, top shelf, no matter where I want. And lastly, the promotions also is something that I kind of have in my hand. As brand owners, what we do have in our hand is, of course, the product itself, the packaging also, and then we have, especially in India, we still have control over the relationships. And if required through some commercials, we can figure out where to place the products, buy some POS if required, point of sale materials, and do some activations around it. Those are things that are still in our hand inside the retailer's place. Same thing in e-commerce as well. Um, Through relationships, if you have a good relationship, or through commercial deals, if you don't have that, if you're not, maybe don't have that relationship, or if you're not large enough, maybe then through commercial deals, you'll have to figure out banner ads, placement ads, buy some of the search keywords, etc., and place your product in the right location. What you do have control over more in marketplace than in retail as well is in marketplaces, at least like on Amazon, you can at least define how your A plus content is shown, at least how your images are shown. Those are things that you are giving. How your description is coming on, what is the header of the title of the product name, etc. Those are still in your hand. So I, as a brand, if I want to show texture in my products, because that's something that beauty products, especially the slightly more premium beauty products, always show, then it's in my hand. If I give those texture shots to Amazon, they will put it. They will have to put it. I'll give them 7 images to put on the A plus content. They will have to put it. So that's still in my hand. On the other hand, in retail stores, you have to buy most of those spaces. Like even if you want to put a shelf strip, most of the times you'll probably have to buy it. If you do buy, then great. Then you have that space. The way you design that space, the way you put visibility on it, uh, helps you tell your brand story or your experience. If not, then you kind of have to depend on the relationship. Varun, I can't hear you.
My bad. Let me try one more time. Can you see, by the way, Kushal's question on the screen itself? Yeah. So he asked
Yes, I can.
basically the science of color. Do you want to take this? Do
Facebook
you want to
open
take this
before
question?
that. Sorry.
Yeah, so basically he's talking about when a brand is evolving the color palette fairly quickly, is it possible to drive brand recall through the color scheme in a scenario like this? How does it really happen?
So, I mean, for me, Facebook is still blue. They've built it for a long enough time to stand for it. After you've done that for a long enough time, for specific campaigns, you want to do something else, you have that leeway. So, I mean, that's what I would say. I don't really know what their plan is, but I don't think they have. I do think that they have used their logo and the color enough number of times consistently over the last many years to stand for one color by now, or two colors, white and blue.
Yeah,
Once you
that's my
do that,
sense
it
as
gives
well.
you some once you do that, it gives you some liberty to play with the colors on a specific campaign tactically.
Yeah, I think that's my sense as well. I think that their blue is fairly well established. I'm not personally sure if they've changed the Pantone shade or anything, but you do associate the Facebook blue with them quite well. Devesh asked wants to know about how to test a logo. How do you know if it's working or not
In
working?
fact, the blue that's on my screen right now looks to me like Facebook blue.
All right, that on a YouTube live stream is not going to be music to Google managers' ears. All right, do you want to take Devesh's question?
What are different ways to test the logo? there. I mean, that's a completely research is a completely different topic which we can talk about for hours and hours. You can do it qualitatively. If you want your logo to stand for certain things, like you say that I want my logo to be like, for example, when Cadbury was defining their logo a long time back, they said that they want Cadbury to stand for the USP that Cadbury chocolates has milk in it. It's a milk chocolate, which is why they put that little glass and a half of milk glass on their logo itself. So if that was the objective of the logo, I'm sure they put it in front of some consumers and asked them if what do they understand from that logo, and if the glass and a half or just the fact that it's a milk chocolate doesn't come out of the responses of the consumers, then they'll go back and redesign the logo. You can test that out in a qualitative by just asking 8 people in a focus group, or you can do it in a quantitative manner. And if you know exactly what your brand, what that logo needs to tell, then maybe you can even do it in a quantitative, do a survey, give it to 15 people, like 50 people or 100 people, and ask them to answer. I mean, research is a very huge topic to kind of get into right now.
Yeah, that's true, and
What do
we're
you
all
think, Varun?
afraid of it because we're all afraid of it because the reality is that there aren't as many good answers there. Like people come in from their own perspective, and most of that perspective is driven by opinions, and so I always think that research should be, like we should get research professionals, and then also we should listen to them with a grain of salt. So that's my belief there. Parth, on the other hand, has a question that's very relevant to the topic at hand. So he asks, can we change the language of the logo? If, for example, it has to be communicated in the southern part of the country, or any, where there's a regional language present, what should be done in that scenario?
I think you should be okay to change that. Uh, Whichever brand I have worked on has been open to changing the language, because you do want people to understand your brand, at least read your brand name. The one caveat is that when you launch in countries beyond, or even in a different script, if you're writing the same name, just be sure to validate it by people who can read that script, and be sure that you're not in trying to say put the exact alphabets that your name of the logo has. You're not saying something which means something very different. Just be kind of careful of that. Otherwise, I feel you should be able to do that. In some of the states and some of the countries, it's legally binded that you have to do it in English. Like at least till last year, Karnataka had this mandate that you need to have logos in retail shops written in. If you want to write it in English, great, but you need to write it in Kannada as well. I'm sure that's a fact in many other states as well. It's there in China as well. It's many countries.
Fair. Before the law was in place, though, I don't remember too many brands changing their language. Like we always saw Maggie as it being written in the English language, and I'm trying to wonder if we had any active discussions on that topic itself. It's just something which is so considered to be the part that you never touch, right? I mean, it's always
Yeah.
the logo is just sort of something that you don't play around with at all. So I don't even remember active discussions on that topic. Now here's an experience of the digital age that a lot of consumers interact with. So the app, the every app essentially refreshes after a few years, in some cases after a few months as well. But Zomato is obviously a very big example where they, when they refreshed it, they refreshed the design, of the app on the home screen itself. I don't know if they've refreshed their logo, but I think the app on the home screen is a pretty big part of the user experience as well. So any thoughts there on how do some of the ideas that you've talked about from a consistency point of view and from changing the logo point of view? Any thoughts there on
I
how
think they
brands?
changed their. I think the last round that changed was the spoon thing, which was a couple of years back.
That was the
So
logo, yes.
I mean, in Zomato's case, especially on the spoon thing, I remember there was context to it. I think it was when they were going into a global expansion. They wanted to be more relevant in US as well. Maybe the name, maybe they wanted a logo which is more contemporary in the US market, makes more sense there as well. So there's always a context for a logo change, and I'm sure over there also they had something. They weren't just changing for the sake of it. I remember very clearly that a couple of years back they were making a global expansion spree, and US was one of the big markets they were going after. And the logo change had like was a year after that, or there was some timeline over there.
Yeah. Yes, I'm just checking the Zomato logo right now. Let me see if I can share my screen for a second. Um, yeah, so I hope you can see
And
this. So
one
this
after
is
that, can we just take one last question and then I'll have to kind of head out a little.
Yes, I'll do that. So just for your reference, this is the logo design that somebody is talking about, which is the logo change, the refresh that they did a couple of years ago. This is what they have right now on. I just checked on my screen, and obviously it is coming from the aspect of wanting to talk safety in deliveries, because that's the defining aspect of the food delivery business right now. All right, so I'm going to take in one
Yeah.
final question here, uh, and I'll sort of leave. Let me see which one I want to take in. There are a few here. All right, I'm going to take in Lalit's question as the last one. All right, so because it also has a compliment. So, by the way, there are a lot of Mama Earth comments in the stream. So the brand is becoming more and more popular. So that's feedback for you. But this was, by the way, this takes us back to Amazon's Or the Cow campaign. That's a 2015 campaign. We've talked a fair bit about it in the past. Uh, but then they sort of evolved it to Apni Dukan, and that's something that they've held stronger. So the question is more from a consistency in storytelling rather than necessarily from a logo standpoint, and goes back, I think, to the example that you took in of Coke. When how does a brand, even when a campaign is working, the brand in this case has chosen not to stick to it, but just keep launching something else until they finalized on Apni Dukan being something that they want to talk about. How do you think a brand sort of makes that choice? How would you make that choice?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And it becomes very difficult when we are talking about other brands because we obviously don't know the internal metrics, how they judged it, etc. But just to take an educated guess, I'm I'm assuming that Or the Cow, which was a very memorable ad and really worked on that A to Z of Amazon, the USP that they are all about variety and number of things that sells on the marketplace. My assumption would be that it was an extremely successful ad campaign that had enough eyeballs having seen it over that year that it was run, which means that they had enough GRPs on it. They would have gone to some 4,000, 5,000 GRPs. They would have had put it on digital media through YouTube and Facebook with at least 100, 150 million people reached. And by that time, and with a decent frequency of 5 7, to have said that it's run its course, and if we keep running it further, while it's a great piece of communication, it may not deliver on top of what it's already achieved. There would be no incremental benefit. And being a brand and a business that has such huge aspirations and ambitions in the Indian market, they then might have decided that let's go for the second round after this. We've established that Amazon has variety and A to Z and Or the Cow. Or the Cow basically means that you will get anything and everything in Amazon and variety of products and options for consumers. Once we've established that, how do we go to the next stage? The next stage and the insight probably there could be that consumers, despite having so many options on Amazon, some of them are still preferring to go to their local neighborhood store where the retailer knows them, and there is this my store kind of a feeling, my local neighborhood kind of a store kind of a feeling, and therefore from there that second campaign could have come. So anyway, I'm talking about without the numbers, but I would assume that they would have reached enough people at a good enough frequency with their GRPs and media plans to be able to say this campaign has run its course and there is no incremental benefit of running it for another year.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'd completely agree with that, and I think that
Does
if
that
you
make
see the
sense?
course yeah, absolutely. I think if you see the course of Amazon itself, they've spoken about many benefits for their online store. They've talked about choices, which is obviously a big benefit, but they've also talked about returns. They've also talked about 100% real products, and they'll continue to talk about different things as the product evolves. And if you're going to be going for something which you want to hold on to for many years, then it's helpful that if it is broad in some sense. Or the cow is very impactful, but it's also sort of singular in that it's only talking about choices, whereas Apni Dukaan can be presented in many ways and can have many benefits sitting under it. So if you're being consistent, you want to make sure that that consistency doesn't tie you down in a substantial way. Any
And in
final
this particular case, I'll just add also that I'll just also add that in but this particular case, Or the Cow was a campaign based on a benefit. It was the benefit of variety and options on Amazon. If in their researches they figured that, let's say, I'm just throwing a number out there, but 80% of the people are aware of the fact that Amazon gives the best variety or most options in all on all marketplaces, then it doesn't make sense for me to continue talking about options and variety with Amazon because that's something that's already been established. Then, as a benefit, I need to talk about something else. Or it'll be better for me. Incremental benefit will only come if I get another benefit to come to 80-85% level. Unless I see that within the next 1 year that 80% number drops again, which I'm assuming hasn't. And therefore, they've moved on to other benefits now.
Super. All right, guys. Thank you.
I would also add. With a thanks to Lalit for the first part of his statement, which was he loved the latest ad of Mama.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of Mama Earth love, and there have been some questions as well that I haven't been able to take in largely because they're not related to the topic at hand. But we'll get you back sometime to answer questions on another topic. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for joining in. Keep joining in for Kraftshala live sessions. We're going to be taking a break next week. So 17th we're going to be taking off, but 24th we're going to be back with the session on marketing alliances in the digital age. That's going to be taken by Shivang, who used to work until recently as the marketing manager at Airbnb and is now part of the Kraftshala team. So look forward to joining you guys there. If you're interested in learning marketing beyond listening to smart people, then go ahead and apply to professional brand management in the digital age. That's by far the best program that you're going to have in marketing, online, offline, on Earth, on the moon, anywhere else, right? Thank you so much for joining in. I wish all of you a very happy Diwali, and Sambit, thank you once again. I wish you the best for your festivities as well. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.